I found that when I tell the truth about my life, when anybody tells the truth about their lives, people respond like it's revolutionary, and they respond like there's a level of authority, which I think is good.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Christy Peel, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
Our Eric Thomas doesn't know this, but he has been on my secret dream guest list for the Flip Your Script podcast for over a year. He's a national best-selling author, playwright, and screenwriter, and he's hilarious. At least he is in writing, and I'm pretty sure he is in person. We're going to find out. His book, which just came out in paperback, Here for It, or How to Save Your Soul in America, was named one of the best books of the year by Elle, NPR, and In Style. For years, he wrote Eric Reads the News, a wildly popular column on Elle.com. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Christy. That introduction, I'm very flattered. And it's like, I always feel like when people are like, oh, I'm excited to meet you, or like when you like, I've never heard like dream guests. I'm like, how do people even know about me? I'm like, you wrote a whole book, Eric. Maybe people have heard of you. So I'm really flattered, and I'm very excited to be here.
Your book, I read it in 2020. I have the hard copy, hardcover, and I have the paperback. And the hardcover, I took it. I was on vacation, I believe, last year, which is weird because in 2020, I did actually go somewhere. And I was sitting by the pool, like laughing out loud and kind of crying, and then having like really deep emotional responses to some of the things you wrote because it is hilarious and important. So for people that don't know, I want to get into that. But I first want to ask you, what is it like to be called by Lin Manuel Miranda?
Oh my gosh.
He says you're one of his favorite writers, and I'm guessing you don't just pay him to say that.
No, I mean, if I could, if other superstar, multi-award winner MacArthur geniuses are interested in me paying them, I'm absolutely willing to do it. But no, Lin Manuel, like I call him by his first name as if I know him. I don't. Like, Mr. Miranda tweeted something about an early copy of the book. We had sent it to him, and I was like there's a scene in My Best Friend's Wedding where Julia Roberts is calling Rupert Everett, and he's at this like very quiet book talk, and she's like screaming into the phone about her, her disastrous love life. And that was me. Like, I was sitting at this very quiet book reading by my friend Dale Baran, and my phone blows up with Twitter notifications. And I was like, oh, it's happened. I've been canceled. And I look at my phone, and people are like, Lin Manuel Miranda just tweeted about your book and called you one of his favorite writers. And I was like, oh no. Oh yes. It is deeply, deeply flattering. And then I'm also like, every time I sit down at a computer, I'm like, I don't want to disappoint Lin Manuel. Like,
that's a lot of pressure.
I know. Oh my gosh. And my mother, of course, is like, are you going to introduce me to David Diggs, who played, Jefferson on Broadway in Hamilton? And I was like, Mommy, I don't know David Diggs. I don't know Lin Manuel Miranda. I'm just hanging out here, putting weird things on the internet, and occasionally something comes back.
So I think this is really important for all the skeptics who say that like everything is paid and nothing is real, and that all this stuff is just fabricated. And for sure, some of it is. Yeah. But it's lovely to hear that a super crazy talented celebrity like Lin Manuel Miranda is just sitting around and can tweet and perhaps change the trajectory of your career.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's so interesting. There, so many people, I feel very fortunate. So many people sort of reached out and found the book, but like there are people with huge platforms. Lin Manuel Miranda and Patchett talked about the book on PBS NewsHour, and that I saw a huge level rise in interest. And then Jenna Bush Hager also picked it as a Today Show Read with Jenna pick. And it's so wild to me because, again, if I could pay those people to help me out, I would. I'll be honest. Like, look, advertising is a great way of getting your name out there, but it's also just amazing that there are people who are that successful, that famous, and that busy who have time to like pick up my book, read through it, and then decide that they want to let other people know about it. That's really exciting.
There's something very pure and just like normal about that, which I love.
Yes, I know. And like, of course, it's also sort of like that kind of thing where you're like, and I say this when I visit like writing classes and high, virtual visits to high schools. I'm like, look, I don't really have a lot of secrets of like success. I'm like, write a book, hope that people notice it. I don't know how to tell you. We sent it to Lin Manuel Miranda. I DM'd him because we had DM'd before about my column, and I was like, "Can I send you my book?" And he was like, "Sure." But like, who knows? Who had like, I don't have time to read a lot, so I can't imagine if you're running around collecting Tonys, you have a whole lot of time. So
your arms are very full with awards.
It's true. Like I if he's maybe like a little wagon that he like takes behind him. That'd be amazing. Little red wagon.
He's got the kids in one carriage and all of his awards in the other. And then he's got your book like strapped to his chest.
Oh my gosh.
I really
I want to get like, I've won 2 awards in my life, which is, I'm very happy with. I want to get like a little stroller. If I win a third, I want to just get like one of those like really nice strollers or like a baby Bjorn and just carry them around to the park.
You should. I think you should. Because who would question that? Like, I wrote a best-selling book. Did you? No. Don't ask any questions. So the moment in the book when I was like, this guy has to be a guest is this quote. So I want to read it to you because it fits so perfectly with what we talk about here and the purpose of the podcast. This is what you wrote. I had a choice, the same choice that rose up over and over again. Do I stay in this hard place stuck? Or do I turn the page even though it hurts and even though I'm afraid? Mm-hmm. Talk about what that means to you.
That quote in context, I think I'm always reaching these points. I think we're all always reaching these points in life where, we can choose. And sometimes it's not a choice, but I think there's always a little bit of choice to it. We can say, I'm going to step into uncertainty, into discomfort, into fear, and believe that there is a greater version of life, a better version of myself on the other side. Or I can stay here, knowing that I'm uncomfortable, but thinking, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, that by not moving, I will save myself some discomfort. And I've encountered those moments throughout my life, and I don't know. I don't want to say that I'm like walking around dissatisfied, but I do believe that there's a constant need for myself, at least, to always be asking what's on the next page. Because if I'm not asking what's on the next page, then I guess I'm at the end of my story, right? And I don't believe that I am. I don't believe that I'm at the end of my story in terms of personal growth, in terms of experience of being a person in the world, in America. But I think that takes it's very scary to venture into the unknown. So,
and your story is so compelling because you grew up in Black church, mm-hmm. and not just like Christmas, Easter, like you're in the Black church every Sunday and enjoying it and really connecting spiritually and with God. And then you realize when you're a teenager that you're a queer man. Mm-hmm. And how do you connect these two things? And, spoiler alert, but if you Google him, you figure this out. You're married to a white preacher. And now you talk about being the preacher's wife, which I think is funny. So how did you navigate all of that and then have the courage to write a book about it? Because you write a book about something like that is hot. That's hot button issues for a lot of folks for a lot of different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the funny thing, it is a minefield to step into, to talk about faith traditions, to talk about queerness inside of Christianity, to talk about the difference between Black church and white church. And the only reason that I felt like in any way equipped to do it, because there's so many people who are writing with much more scholarly insight or much more sort of theological understanding or, all manner of things. The only reason that I felt equipped to do it is because all I was going to do was tell the truth about my own life. And I found that when I tell the truth about my life, when anybody tells the truth about their lives, people respond like it's revolutionary, and they respond like there's a level of authority, which I think is good. People are allowed to tell their own stories. But I had this insane belief when I was a kid that I wasn't actually bad. Like I didn't think, despite all the messages that I was getting, I was like, I'm trying my best here. I'm going, and I'm clapping, sometimes on beat, sometimes off. I have to admit, I'm like talking to God. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do in life. And I just don't believe that this black or white sort of dichotomy of either you are good and going to heaven, or you're bad and you're going to hell because of who you are. And so as I started to wake up to these different ideas inside of myself, I was like, well, I think all these things can be true. And there wasn't a lot of room for doubt or for questioning in my home church. And one of the things that was exciting is that later on, when I discovered my husband's church, their tagline was like, doubt's welcome. And I was like, well, this doesn't seem like church to me, because if I'm doubting, then what are we doing here? But it's like, well, it's called church. It's not called fact finding. So that was really freeing. But it answered a question that I'd asked inside of myself, 20 years earlier, sitting in my home church and asking, like, is it okay that I don't know all the answers? And I think the answer has to be yes. Otherwise, and some people disagree. I'm not telling anybody how to believe in God, and I'm not telling anybody that the way I believe in God is the right way. Baby, I'm just trying to have a pleasant life, go directly to heaven on an express elevator. I don't want to stop at different floors. Seems like a long way.
And I think that's what's so captivating about the way that you tell your story is that you're not trying to convince anyone of anything. No. You're not trying to make theological arguments. You're not trying to anything except this is my experience. And you're so honest. Was it hard for you to decide to be honest? Because sometimes when people put their stories out there, they do the Instagram filter thing on it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'd had a couple of years of sort of practice. One, I started going to therapy, and therapy only works when you're honest. And then I was a part of a group of people, a friend group, where there was just sort of, and a lot of them were a little bit older than me. And so they'd been through some stuff, and they were like, we don't have time to dress up our lives. Or they're going to tell the truth about their love lives and their health struggles and their, whatever was going on in their lives. And so that level of vulnerability woke me up. And I think when you extend your own vulnerability to somebody else in a way that's safe and sort of not sort of dumping it on them, it gives the listener permission to tell the truth about themselves as well. And so that period led to a period where I was doing these one-man shows where I was just telling stories about my life. And they were a little bit experimental because I was like, well, I'm going to just tell what happened and what I thought about it. And people responded so strongly. And I was like, oh, so all I got to do is tell the truth and maybe add a couple little jokes. And so it was intoxicating. And I know that's not the case for everybody. I felt very lucky. Sometimes people say, this is who I am, and they get mass rejection. But I found the right audience for myself. And it was very painstaking. And it started off with one therapist and then 2 or 3 friends, and then a small cabaret space of people who were interested in what I had to say and believed in me. And that's the only way that I think I could have done it. I don't think I could have come out of the blocks and just written this book 15 years ago and been like, here's all my stuff. And now even still, my mother's like, you put all our business on the internet. And I was like, I did not put all our business on the internet. I put all my business on the internet. Nobody knows your business. So let's get it straight. So
I've got that book written and I'm waiting until you pass on them. Then it's coming out. No.
Right.
There's so many people that have walked a similar path to yours who walk away from church.
Mm-hmm.
and say, never again, not for me, I can't go. What gave you the confidence and the courage and I guess perhaps the curiosity to stay?
And I don't know, like I've interrogated this, I've thought it through, and there are some questions that you're like, I don't know, but like, I've never sort of doubted the basic premise. I never thought, oh, there's no God, and like, which is no shade to anybody who that's their journey, agnosticism or atheism. Like, sure. I was just sort of like, okay, this is my entry point. And so I'm like, well, there is something or somewhere that has had some hand in bringing me about in the world and perhaps cares what happens to me. I don't know. Maybe not. Who can say? And so with that being the ground floor for me, I was never able to sort of like, to extend the metaphor, leave the building. I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be where these people are, where it's all fire and brimstone, but maybe there's a relationship possible. I'm also somebody who like I don't like to leave things badly with exes. And so I'm like, I'm always like, all right, maybe 2 years have gone by. Maybe I'll like email them and be like, do you hate me? What's going on? And then like that, like this was my first experience. I was like, hey God, how you doing? So I know it didn't work out that first time, but maybe we can like, I don't know, try something different, a different sort of paradigm. And God was like, sure, what's up? Let's go out to dinner. And I was like, okay, great. Sounds good.
I'll bring the crackers.
Right.
You bring the grape juice. Sorry, communion humor for folks that don't get communion humor. Forgive me. So when you go out now and you come out with your truth and you're still writing a lot of things and you're out there on social media very prolifically, what's your next thing? Because you've been once you're out with your story, like as you said, the page keeps turning. So you've got a lot, your memoir 2 and 3 and 4, like who knows what's out there for you. But are there things that you're passionate about that you want to keep exploring, or is it you?
Well, it's interesting, like, because I write in so many different disciplines, like I'm a playwright and I've just started writing for television, which was sort of a weird little gift of the pandemic, like, because I don't live in Los Angeles or New York, that wasn't really an option for me. But I was able to like write for a couple of TV shows over Zoom. I was able, after the book came out, to sort of step away and step into a fictional space. And I think, I'm interested in a lot of things, but I'm always interested, it's just sort of at a base in like how we find joy and which maybe seems simplistic. There are times that I think it's, I feel like I'm Ted Lasso and I'm like, well, I just love when everybody loves everybody. But I do also think that even the idea for me in my life, the idea of me saying at certain points in life, I'm happy here, I'm happy to be alive. Even that has been sort of revolutionary to other people or controversial to other people. And so I think the thing that I'm always sort of reaching for, and I think I want to keep reaching for in writing, is like, how do I keep a piece of joy in my life, which I was a challenge before. And then after the last year and a half, I'm like, oh, I certainly have set myself an interesting goal. The question I always have is I say it in the book, why bother to wake up tomorrow? Like, there has to be a reason. And why bother to want to wake up tomorrow? And so I think I'm always trying to, in writing and creating, trying to reaffirm that's the right decision, and trying to really thread the needle of like, why do we want to be here? Not why are we here, but why do we want to be here? And if we don't want to be where we are, why do we want to be where we want to be, and how are we going to get there?
And you're pretty humble, because when you say, oh, I've written for a couple of TV shows, like, let's just visit what those are. Peabody Award-winning series Dickinson on Apple TV and Better Things on FX. Like, you're not writing for like, writing for some, I don't know, some TV shows.
I mean, I got extremely, extremely lucky. Like, I mean, like literally 2 of the best television shows on television right now, and such different experiences. But I just got very lucky, like Alina Smith, the showrunner of Dickinson. I think she had been following me online and following my column. And so she reached out and then she discovered I was a playwright. And she was like, oh, do you want to like come and talk about my show? And a very sort of similar thing with Better Things and Pamela Adlon. I like, and again, it's sort of like useless to me to like when people are like, well, what's your advice? I'm like, I don't know. Like, be ready. That's all I have. So I had a fantastic time, and it's sort of like, I hope it's not all downhill from here.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Well,
Lin could call you at any minute.
oh my gosh. Oh my, I wouldn't pick up because I don't pick up the phone.
You call him back.
I would if he left a message. Otherwise, I'd be like, well, I don't know who that was. So we'll figure that out.
Hamilton. I don't know. Should I answer it? So is it more of a compliment for you if someone says, you made me laugh or you made me think?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it changes every day. I love to make people laugh. And so I think it's probably more of a compliment to say you made me laugh. But one of the things that I was totally wrong about with this book, I thought, because I was writing a humor column when I started the book, that, and most people knew me from my humor column, that people were going to want to laugh 35 times every page. And if it got serious for 1 second, they get annoyed. And my editor, Sarah Weiss, was like, she's just so smart. And she was like, you can pull back a little bit. You can just tell the truth. And I do that when I'm telling stories, like on stage. I feel I always have a sort of arc where it's like we front load with jokes, and then we do a little bit of like world building, and then there's a little, we do a little bit more joking, and then it really glides into this like heartfelt space. And I forget that. I forget that there's another side. And I think it's part of a transaction. I think we're all sort of, I think maybe a lot of us have this idea of what the world wants from us or what other people want from us. And I think the lie that I tell myself sometimes is that people just only want funniness from me. They only want to laugh. And that's not true. But I also never want to be that person who's like, excuse me, everyone, I have a thought. I'm coming down from the mountain, and I've been pondering. So I do try it. I'm just like, keep it light, keep it funny, and every once in a while, if you have some sort of deep thought, all right, sure, don't annoy people about it.
In the last 18 months of the world,
mm-hmm.
having a reason to laugh
mm-hmm.
and at the same time a reason to think
mm-hmm.
is so profound, maybe in a way that it wouldn't have been 5 years ago. I don't know. But
mm-hmm.
when this book came out, there's something so, I think, important about realizing how much we're the same,
mm-hmm.
because the world is so polarized, and you kind of, just through your story and through the truth, bring people together to a place of like, I can get on board with that. I don't know that I totally agree over here or over here, but like, yeah, that makes sense. Did you realize you were doing that as you were writing, or is that just who you are?
I think
bringer togetherer, which isn't actually any words at all, but
I love
bridge builder.
I'm gonna put bringer togetherer on LinkedIn. I mean, that's my new thing. I think that's just kind of who I am. I didn't, because, and it's interesting. Like, I do believe that there is a place where people who are operating in good faith can find each other, and I believe that space isn't in the middle as we might think of it in our sort of more polarized space. I do believe it's closer to one side than the other, but regardless, I'm always thinking about a vision of utopia. And because I'm a theater artist and because I am a storyteller, I'm very sort of attuned to this idea, to the feeling of being in a space with a whole bunch of other people and all of us experiencing the same thing. And sometimes that thing being joy communally, sometimes it's laughter, sometimes it's sadness, and knowing that is always possible. And so when I'm telling these stories, when I'm writing this book, when I'm making the points that I'm making, I'm just not trying to be combative. I'm trying to tell a story, and I'm trying to appeal to the humanity in all of us, and also the part of all of us that is searching for utopia. And there were times that I feel like that is the silliest thing. There are times that I feel like it is so facile, and we need to be, and there are people I follow online and people who I really respect who, have a very different approach. And there are times that I don't feel very much like a bringer together. I feel like I'm going to yell at everybody. But then I ask myself, like, well, what's like, What do I get from that? And so sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't. And that's just who I am. And sometimes, I don't know what waits for us as a society, as a people. I hope that it is closer and not farther away, because it just things don't work when we're far away. And I think we all have seen that.
Because of your story and the way that you write and the vulnerability and what you talk about, how do you keep away the hate? How do you deal with the negative comments? They have to come to you. I mean, not every DM is Lin Manuel Miranda.
No,
right?
No. Oh my goodness, no. Yeah, I don't know.
Because you are talk about so openly about finding joy, and you want joy and having joy, but that kind of stuff can suck your soul dry. The hate. How do you help us?
Oh gosh, I wish I could help you. I can tell you this: every mean thing that's ever been said to me, I remember word for word. It is deranged, but I always have to ask myself, was I wrong? And not in correct or incorrect, but did I do something to harm this person? And most of the time the answer is no. So because then I don't really have any other way of engaging with this transaction. So yeah, the hate comes, people say this was stupid, you're an idiot, blah blah blah. And it's always it's amazing. It's almost never for my book. It's always a one sentence tweet and people are how dare? And I'm oh my goodness, it's a tweet. I have a book full of my book is 70,000 tweets. You want to read that? And then yell at me. So I'm always what does this person want from me in this interaction? They want me to fight them or they want me to feel bad. But I haven't harmed them. And we may not have an opinion that aligns, but this isn't about me. And it's very hard to remember that, but I always I just sort of always end it with well, what can I do about this? What can I do to fix this? There was somebody who sent me a very, very mean letter after a public performance once. And it was 1,000 people in the place. It was a really successful night. I felt really good about the show. And he said these crazy things. He found my email. So first of all, thank you for going to my website. Enjoy. And he was your husband must be rich for you to waste your time making these terrible jokes and blah, 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 all this, all that. And I was oh, my husband's a pastor. Pastors are chronically underpaid. Let's be serious. You don't know what you're talking about. But then, of course, I Googled him and I was okay, well, he owns a videography business and I can drive down there and wear a wig and maybe order videography. And then what? And I was well, then what, Eric? What are you going to do? And I was well, I don't know what the plan is. So I abandoned it. I'm not a cast member on The Americans. I don't have the ability to to exact revenge. So I was okay, this relationship is done. He was mad. He sat through the whole show, so enjoy.
And he paid for a ticket, which you cashed.
Right. So, and it wasn't it was to me. If it was to me directly, he I would have just been here's your money back. But it was to another organization, and I was just hosting the show, and there was, different acts. So he had a good time, even though he doesn't know it. And I just had to let it be. As you can see, I'm not over it, but I had to let it be.
Well, and that's so true. 999 people in there loving it, standing up, probably clapping. And then you get the one letter and you remember the one letter.
Yeah.
That is all of us are like that. That's very screwed up.
Yeah. I'm trying to get out of that. And I think it's I think the reason I talk about it a fair amount, and I even mention it in the book, is because it's the yeses have to matter as much as the nos. They have to matter more. And it's harder to give them as much weight because a no is confirming something that sort of I believe deep down. I'm not good enough. I'm not funny. No one likes me. And a yes is sort of oh, they're just being nice. And it's who has the time to be nice in this economy? I mean, I've met some very nice people, but when I write a fan letter, when I write to somebody and say, I loved this, when I go to a show and I wait afterwards and I'm that was amazing, I'm not doing it just because I want to fluff somebody's ego. I'm doing it because I was moved and I felt I had an experience that exceeded what I was hoping for. And I'm telling the truth. And I have to believe that when people say yes, that they're telling the truth.
So we talked about the hate part, and it would be totally wrong if we didn't talk about what is the nicest thing that anyone has ever said to you? Like, what's the best compliment?
Oh gosh. Oh man. I'm trying to
See, now look at this, just proves the point, because I asked negative and it was right there, and the best thing you had to think about.
Yeah.
And everyone is like that.
It's true. It's true. I'm not going to say people, and I feel bad for everyone who's listening, who's like, I said something nice. Why isn't he talking about that? It is the specificity, sort of blends together, but like the effect does not. And so like there are people who have written and said, I'm nothing like you. I'm a mom in Kansas. A lot of people, a good number of people talk about listening to my book on walks and how it kept them company. And that's stunning. A couple of people have said, I gave birth to my baby and I was so overwhelmed by everything. And all I could do at the end of the day, I was so exhausted, was like, listen to your book. And it really brought me joy in a dark time or a hard time. And that's so stunning to me. So those kind of things where people talk about my book as a beacon of light for them are so important. And I appreciate everything, but those are the ones that like really stun me and knock me back on my heels, because that's the highest sort of aspiration that anyone, I think, can have for a piece of art, is to sort of bring somebody out of the darkness.
There is no higher praise.
Yeah. Yeah. I really I would never, far be it from me to like sit down on my laptop and be like, today I'm going to bring somebody out of the darkness. I got a lantern. We're going down. The end of the tunnel is coming up. I couldn't possibly. And it's funny. There's this isn't me being shady, but there's a sort of motivational speaker who's named Eric Thomas. Sometimes I will get letters for him where people talk about the profound effect that he's had on their lives. And it's stunning. I mean, people love Eric Thomas. It's really wild. And I'm always, but then sometimes people will ask me for help. And I'm always like, oh, I'm sorry. I honestly I don't know what to do. I'm not the person you're looking for. But I'm impressed that he has chosen a path as a motivational speaker, because the bar is so high to motivate anybody to do anything. And I'm like, I'm afraid. And so I just sort of say like, oh, I'm just here to have a good time, and hopefully you'll laugh. And so when people come back and say like, it really changed something for me, that's stunning.
And the podcast is Flip Your Script, and you have flipped your script as a human. I mean, the way that you think about the world has changed, and your career has flipped a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it looks like, based on what you're doing, it's going to continue to evolve and to flip and to change. What advice do you have for people who are, and I read that quote earlier, who are in this space where they're afraid about, gosh, I got it. To turn the page is going to be hard and it's scary and I don't know what's on the other side, but golly, I think I should. What do you tell them?
Well, some of the best instances of where I flipped the script, I didn't really know what I was getting into. And I think if I had, I might have had a lot more trepidation. And so and now I say quick yeses a lot of times now, where I'm like, I don't know, this could be hard. And then I'm like, yes, we're going to do it. Because if I think about it too much, I start to build up all the no's. I start to paint a picture of how hard it's going to be. And so like a lot of times quick yeses really get me in the real pickles, but they also get me to the next place. The other thing that I always think about is that when I'm about to step into something that I don't know what's on the other side, or I think it's going to be hard or scary, I think back to all the other times that I've stepped through something or been forced through something. And one of the things I do a lot actually is I write letters to my future self. And so and there's this website called futureme.org, and you can write a letter to your future self and set it to deliver at a date in the future. And so I do that all the time. And sometimes I'll receive them from myself, like out of the blue, because I never remember when I'm going to send them. And so just like me from 10 years ago is like, oh, Eric, did you ever finish, writing that little show? And I'm like, oh, you wouldn't believe what I finished. And so when I do that, and that's one of the there's a little epilogue in the book that kind of is my version of doing that, like, but putting it into text. When I'm scared to step forward, I think about the person that I used to be and how he had to keep stepping forward to get to where I am. And then I think about the person that I might become. And I always think there is a version of me in the future for where all this drama that I'm going through right now, he doesn't even remember it. For me, that's a really good way of putting myself in context. I was going to say tricking myself, but I'm always aware. It's just putting my journey in context and saying, like, the you of the future might be grateful, might be resentful, might be like, why did you do this? But he's on the other side and he's doing okay. He's got his own stuff to deal with.
Because tomorrow's coming either way. I mean, the future's coming.
Hello? I mean, it's true. Like, that's the thing. I want to wake up tomorrow. I talk a big game about the future. But then when it comes time to suit up and go to the future, I'm like, oh, no, no, no. What if I just stayed super comfortable here in the past? Not an option, baby. So I'm trying to go into the future with as much bravery as I can. And to always be prepared. I always bring an umbrella. And I mean that metaphorically and actually. Like, so I am prepared for what will come. I'm not deluding myself to think that it's not going to be scary. Or it's not going to be hard, but I don't have to be afraid of how scary or hard it is. I just have to be prepared for it and to know that there's a version of me on the other side that's not scared anymore.
Your epilogue is it's perhaps my favorite epilogue of all time because they're on a cruise ship, right? Mm-hmm. You, your past, your future, all of them. And it keeps getting funnier and truer. And it's just it's such a lovely way to end the story because it is that reminder that what you did in the past impacts your future, but it doesn't have to hold you back. Yeah. And your future self is impacted by what you're doing now. And P.S., the future's coming and it's awesome, no matter what it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, it's interesting. I think for me, it was very much like sort of stylistically a return to sort of a root version of myself because I was a playwright first. And it was also it was like my report card for my the three therapists I've had throughout my life to be like, look, I learned. But also, like, the process of writing a book, you don't have to work through your stuff to write a book. I've read a number of books where I'm like, I don't think you fully processed this. But I only put things in the book that I was like, I think I'm on the other side. So the book as a whole, and then that epilogue are sort of my way of acknowledging all of the hard spaces that I sort of occupied and the people that I was in that space, and really confronting the fear that I'm not going to be the person that I was when I wrote the book, that I'm going to keep changing. There's a 50-year-old version, like I think it's like 45 or 46-year-old version of myself comes back through time and the stage direction says he's very rich. And I was like, Eric, you're really trying it. And then there's a 55-year-old version comes back and he's wearing the same suit as the 46-year-old and he looks really worse for the wear. And he's like, the future is bleak. And I was like, Eric, what are you doing? But I want to confront the idea that, like you say, tomorrow's going to come either way. Maybe it'll be good fortune, maybe it'll be bad fortune. But the only thing that I am sort of hedging my bet on with this is that I'm going to be alive for it. And everything else is sort of like out of my control to a certain extent. And so I have to acknowledge that. To not acknowledge it, to end the book and say I lived happily ever after would be disingenuous and wild, especially since I'm writing another memoir, I'd be like, well, actually, what actually happened was, like, get out of here. You're
Turns out. And you made it okay to laugh at things that previously were a little bit off. We don't talk about those things, which is, I think, no matter where you are on the spectrum of these different topics, church and gender and race. And I mean, there's just a lot.
Yeah.
And you do it in a way where nobody's laughing at you, but to laugh with you at these things. And in the last, 18 months of the world, all of us are having conversations, I think, that with people that we had never thought to have conversations with, and questioning people around us. And there's all these divides and things happening. And you said, you know what? Not only is it okay to talk about some hard things, it's okay to laugh.
Yeah.
And to find joy in them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise, these places where I felt othered, the places where I felt not enough, places where I felt not at home in America, they continue to be wounds for me. And if I am able to say, I'm going to work through this, and then I'm going to find the humor in it, then it doesn't have the same power over me. And I think a lot of people maybe, were surprised, if they didn't identify in the same way as I do racially, in terms of sexual orientation, faith, whatever, they may have been surprised to find themselves, laughing at some of these jokes. But some comedians say you can't joke about anything anymore. And that is patently false. And the fact of the matter is you can't abuse anything anymore. You can joke, but you have to understand where the focus of the joke is. And so for me, the focus of the joke is, isn't it absurd that we have a concept called race and that people are using the melanin content of my skin against me? Isn't it absurd that we have this history in this country that we are patently ignoring? Isn't it absurd that I felt insecure as a queer person, and so I wanted to make myself more masculine so people wouldn't yell things at me on the street? And so the thing that I did to make myself more masculine was to join the gay softball league. Baby, what are we doing here? Let's wake up. But it's a commonality thing. And the butt of the joke is this idea that all of us share, that we don't quite feel like we are getting it right in our own skin. And the butt of the joke is never Black people, white people, gay people. And I think that's important, because, to make a group of people or an experience, the joke is to perpetuate the abuse that, and the systems of oppression. Whereas to sort of say, you can understand the shoes that I'm walking in, and I'm going to give you humor as another tool of understanding that. That's a tool of freedom. That's a key out of the prison. And I believe that wholeheartedly.
There were a lot of gems in what you said, so I hate to turn us to the ending, but I don't know how to make what you said more profound, because it was. So I have 3 quick questions. First of all, what are you reading? What should we read besides going out and buying the paperback version of your book and your next book? And we're going to put links to all of that on the Flip Your Script podcast website, as well as your website. We'll put a link there as well. So what should we be reading?
Let's see. I am midway through Mike Nichols, the biography of Mike Nichols by Mark Harris, and I think it's phenomenal. Sarah Roll is a playwright par excellence, and she has a new book coming out called Smile that I got an advance copy of, and it's phenomenal. Sarah has another book about playwriting called 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write, which is also really good, but it's more focused on the craft of playwriting. But Smile is about her experience with Bell's palsy, and it's just phenomenal. So Mike Nichols by Mark Harris is on my nightstand right now, and then Smile by Sarah Roll.
What's your prayer for our country?
Oh, joy. I honestly, this is the heart of so much that's happening right now is anger and frustration, and some of it very righteous. But when I look at some of the people that I don't agree with, for instance, and look at the way that they behave, I ask myself, is the end result of this happiness? Or will you be happy if you get what you want? And I question that. So I want joy for all of us. And I think that joy is possible. And I don't think it comes at the expense of anyone's freedoms or experiences of life. I don't know. I come from a way of living where giving of yourself and giving to the community and understanding where other people are coming from and finding the best way forward for the community, that is the center of joy. And so I believe that that's the prayer for me.
What I think I really, if I can boil it down, what I love about what you've said and your book and your perspective is that you're an and person. You're not an or person. Mm-hmm. It can be this and it can be this. It doesn't have to be or, and it doesn't have to be either, and it doesn't have to be semicolon. It can just be, we can be all of these things and I think that goes back to the joy piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, thank you for putting it that way. You know, it's like when you do improv, you're supposed, somebody makes a statement, I'm in the mall. If you say, no, you're not, the improv doesn't work. If you say, we are in the mall, yes, and there is a clown parade coming through, then the scene progresses and it gets funnier. So the yes and opens up doors. Whereas, no, get out, don't do this. To what end? I don't know. For me, it's about accepting reality. Well, this is the reality we have, We're trying to get healthy. We're trying to stay safe. We're trying to keep the planet from swallowing us whole. Those are the facts. Yes. And, we are not going to get a version of the past back. We're not going to fly backwards around the earth like Superman and turn back the clock. So what are we going to do?
And when you meet your 87-year-old self on a cruise ship, what are you going to tell him or her that you did to fix it or to make other people happy or to make people laugh? Exactly.
Or you're going to be like the 87-year-old's going to be like, well, did you tweet a lot of angry things? And they'll be like, I sure did, Father. Thank you. It's like little wizened fingers all crunched up because he's got all the carpal tunnel from trolling. I don't know. I don't think so.
Life's too short, right? To hate. Last question. Is there a book, a quote or a song or a lyric or something that has motivated you to flip your script?
Oh, absolutely. It's New Attitude by Patti LaBelle, which is a very flip your script song. She has a new attitude. And when I moved to Philadelphia, it was very much on a whim. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know, but it was scary and I just needed to step forward into something else. And I was like, well, Patti LaBelle's here. I was a huge fan of Patti LaBelle. And I was like, maybe I'll meet her one day. And I didn't. And then one day I did. She showed up at the restaurant where I worked. And I ran over her and I was like hyperventilating. And we took a picture together and I put it up on MySpace. And it didn't change my life. And so I kept thinking, I moved all this way. I chased Patti LaBelle around central Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania. What is the problem? And the problem was I wasn't stepping forward into fear. I wasn't pursuing what I really wanted to do. I was working in a restaurant that I wasn't really happy at. And I was, I wasn't pursuing art. And so I was listening to New Attitude, but I wasn't living New Attitude. And so the minute I started living New Attitude, and I really credit it to Patti LaBelle and to the fact that taking a picture with her is a great experience, but it doesn't bippity boppity boom me into a new life. That's when everything started to change for me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
There's so many things about what we talked about that I could go on and on about all the gems, and I'll probably listen to this a few times and write some of them down. But I think what's so important is that it's not the end of the story until you quit turning the page. So keep turning the page because you don't know what's on the other side. Have the courage. And at the end of the day, let's just all be bringer-togetherers together. My hope is Eric's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Christy Peel and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Christy Peel on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.